As the religion grew bigger, so it grew more ambitious. Territorial expansion was a characteristic of nomadic Arabs well before the arrival of Muhammad. Tribal leaders would initiate razzia, or raids, on their neighbours. And with the advent of Islam, these gained some kind of spiritual significance. This is what one commander was reported to have said in one of the earliest ever Arabic chronicles. "This land is your inheritance and the promise of your Lord. You've been tasting it and eating from it. You have been killing its people and taking them into captivity. You are Arab chiefs and notables. If you renounce this world and aspire to the hereafter, God will give you this world and the hereafter." They believed they were inspired by the power of God. Within decades, Islamic Arabs had reached as far as Persia in the east. In the west, they'd conquered Egypt, Jordan, and much of North Africa, and were within spitting distance of Europe. But Islam wasn't only interested in territorial expansion. It was also a faith committed to the pursuit of learning. Among the Prophet's first revelations was the instruction, "Seek knowledge." This meant that from the very earliest days of Islam, literacy and religious study went hand in hand. Whereas a number of other religions of the day preferred to keep literacy the privilege of a clerical elite, Islam actively encouraged it. In the ancient Muslim city of Fez in Morocco, there are many examples of this unique integration of religion and education. This is the Karouin Mosque in Fez, and it's still the heart of religious life here. It was founded in 859 by a woman, both as a religious and as an educational establishment. Mosques were used for teaching grammar and literacy to ordinary people. In time, colleges, known as madrasas, were set up. This is the madrasa Bu Inania. Its walls are covered with the rich, rhyming prose of the Quran.
The mosque is only part of the complex, which contains both it and the madrasa. When the Sultan Abu Anan founded the place, he built the mosque alongside the madrasa. It is most symbolic. The mosque, built for prayer, was also a place which encouraged education and learning. As you can see, there is no separation. When the Quran was given to the Prophet, who was illiterate, the angel told him, "Read." These inscriptions carved onto the walls are verses of poetry and can be found throughout the madrasa. But I think the most important section is here. What it says in Arabic is, "I am the apogee of knowledge. Come, you Muslims. Come and learn, because with knowledge you can become what you want to be in the future." During the medieval period, knowledge was high on the agenda in the Islamic world. Muslim societies produced many books in the various spheres of knowledge, and these books came to be known worldwide.
It wasn't just an enlightened attitude to reading which placed learning at the heart of the Islamic world. Necessity was also the mother of invention.
Because the Arabs were nomads and desert traders who often had to travel in the cool of the night, they were well versed in using the stars as guiding devices. This developed into a very sophisticated study of astronomy. Then with the establishment of Islam, that knowledge was applied in a new way. Whenever a mosque was built, the prayer niche had to be orientated in direct relation to Mecca, and there were a number of religious festivals that had to fall on certain days in the lunar year.
These were complex mathematical problems for which the Muslims devised precise solutions. Islam became a culture which naturally embraced scientific and mathematical investigation. This uninhibited attitude towards learning meant that when Muslims encountered the teachings of other cultures, they seized upon them vigorously. In the very early days of Islam, Muslims came into contact with a body of knowledge which had been ignored by most of Northern Europe for centuries. The works of the ancient Greeks.
It's once you look at a globe that it becomes particularly easy to understand why the Arabs were such natural inheritors of Greek learning. From the Bronze Age onwards, there'd been a constant exchange of artifacts and information all across the Eastern Mediterranean. And in fact, a number of Greek ideas stem from Eastern and Egyptian influences. The bulk of this knowledge was preserved in the great schools and library at Alexandria. And then in 641 AD, the Arabs take over the city. And at a stroke, have direct access to this precious learning.
Many of these texts found their way to Fez. This is an Arabic translation of Aristotle with an additional commentary by the Muslim scholar Averroes.
Translation's done in Iraq, and then Averroes does this commentary in Al-Andalus.
There's even an early Arabic translation of the Bible.
So it's extraordinary, isn't it, that Arabic's the lingua franca, then everybody's writing in Arabic, even the Bible.
And thus ends the Gospel of Mark the Apostle.
The contrast with Europe at this time could not have been greater. Here, ancient Greek texts and the rational investigation they contained were often feared as blasphemous.
When the Prophet Muhammad was born, Christianity had already been battling with paganism for 600 years, trying to persuade believers to turn away from their old gods to the one new God. And because of that, Christians were often suspicious of Greek and Roman pagan texts. For instance, in 529 AD, the Christian emperor Justinian closed down the Athenian schools of philosophy.
Set against this vibrant Islamic culture, Europe can appear an introspective and intellectually cautious place. It was certainly a continent in crisis.
After the fall of Rome, there was a power vacuum in Europe, with rival tribes squabbling for territories. It was the start of what later Christian scholars would describe as the Dark Ages.
While Europe lay unprotected and vulnerable, Islam was consolidating land and power. By the beginning of the 8th century, the Arabs had converted the Berber tribes at the very tip of North Africa. And before long, troops were gathered on the coast, their eyes fixed on Europe. This little stretch of water between Spain and Morocco is only 9 miles wide, but it's come to represent some kind of cultural chasm between Europe and Africa. But in the 8th century, when sea travel was the way to get around, that wasn't a barrier, it was a highway. In July 711, 7,000 Berber tribesmen stormed across the Straits of Gibraltar and invaded Europe. The Muslims then began an incredible process of expansion. In just 4 years, they'd colonised almost the whole of Spain, had crossed the Pyrenees, and were only halted at Poitiers in France. Were it not for this reverse, an army which had swept across 2 continents might easily have crossed the English Channel and occupied Britain. The Muslims called the country they came to Al-Andalus, the land of the Vandals. This refers to the Germanic tribe who ruled Spain at the time, the Visigoths. Spanish historians have traditionally seen the Muslim invasion of Spain as a terrible and violent attack, an assault on Christian Europe. In fact, here at the Visigothic site of Recopolis near Madrid, archaeologists have found evidence which offers a rather different explanation.
The city of Recopolis, in fact, was the royal city founded by the Visigoths in order to demonstrate the power of the new state. Dimensions were spectacular for this period. And this complex is the most important discovery in Western Europe.
What was it at the time that the Muslims were invading? What was the state of the city then?
They found it not only here in this part of Iberia, but in everywhere of the Al-Andalus. They founded cities in crisis. Social crisis, of urban crisis. The traditional explanation is this idea that when the Arabs came, the society collapses and the city collapses. It's not true. It's not true. The collapse of the city started during the Visigothic period.
If you read the Orthodox Spanish histories, then you'll learn that predatory Muslim hordes forcibly appropriated Visigothic Spain. And there certainly were some invasion battles. But at many places, like here at Recopolis, it seems that the newcomers were actually welcomed with open arms. We even have treaties where the Visigoths enthusiastically hand over their land in return for effective Muslim protection. When you were excavating, did you find any evidence of violence at the time of the Arab invasion?
We don't have evidence of violence. Not at all. In this area was peaceful, and the archaeology is showing another landscape, another explanation. Too. the Muslims started to build a new society.